Hello everyone, now I have my wand here, otherwise known as Patrick, and welcome to another beginner's guide to Legacy's Allure. And in this episode, we're going to be going over drafting positioning. So, draft is pretty important, and when you're first getting started off, you might have a hard time knowing where to put pieces. You might have a general idea of like, oh, this piece does really well here, but then after a while, you just start putting pieces in suboptimal locations. And in here, I'm just trying to give a broad example of like, this is what you should be looking out for. This is what likes to go here. Here's why, and just all that kind of good stuff. So here, I actually have cards for each faction that like to go in certain spots. And of course, this isn't an end all be all. You don't have to put things here specifically what I'm talking about. It's just a general, hey, if you're having trouble figuring out what's good here, this is what's usually good here, and just a short explanation. First off, the middle piece, the very middle piece. This, I would say, is kind of a wild card. There are a lot of pieces that can go here and have them do well. Really anything that I talk about can kind of go here if the situation calls for it. Like literally any piece. Usually you want your more important pieces here just because it's in the middle, but you really can put anything in this exact middle spot and have it be good for a few reasons. One, it's right next to the middle, so most things are able to threaten the middle very easily. I can get around the place easier, and it's usually pretty safe. Usually, if you put a thing here, it's usually pretty safe. You can easily protect it with something, or so on and so forth. So this is usually a wild card. If you want to put something here, you can probably get away with it. And then these four spots, a lot of people like to call the fangs. And usually what I like to go here are first off, very beefy units. So as you can tell, all these units here are very beefy. They are not easy to kill, or they have keywords that keep them safe. That's for a couple of reasons. One is because the knight, for example, has 3 movement. It can immediately threaten this hex here. From turn 1 of the game, it's immediately threatening this hex. So just having some pieces that can take a hit, just a hit, is usually very important just because, well, if they could easily, if you draft a knight here, they could draft something here. Well, not a knight. If you draft something that's a little squishier here, they could draft something here to take it out. Might not be super optimal for the enemy, but it is something to keep in mind because they might snipe something of equal gold cost or something. And so let's just keep in mind. Or you could have something like the Elite Swordsman, which has Counter Strike. Counter Strike, of course, if they do take a turn 1, well, Counter Strike's going to hit it, and then it's probably going to take it out itself, or you can just do next turn, kill it, or whatnot. So usually these fangs are usually very beefy. These middle 2 fangs are usually just, big beaters. Like the 12 golds are very good. They're very good at just killing stuff, being really hard to kill, and just being general nuisances for the enemy. Because they can easily get around anywhere on the board, they can get anywhere they need to, and just start wreaking havoc if you find a gap in their defenses. So Heavy Knight, Iron of Minotaur, Boil are really good in these spots just because, like I said, they're really beefy. Nothing's really going to kill them very easily, and they do a ton of damage. Something like in the other middle fang is usually just really slow units. The Battering Ram and Thorn Elemental have 1 movement, so if you're putting them anywhere that's not near the middle, and it's suddenly like round 5 and it's over here, it's going to be useless until it gets here. Might not even make it there in time. So usually these really slow units like to just move up, sit here, and then just be here the whole game. Like Cave Troll, Thorn Elemental, Battering Ram. They usually just like to sit in the middle of the whole game. Cave Troll can kind of move around just because he has 2 movement, but he is still pretty slow. No charging, gets shot a lot, so a lot of the slow units like to be in the front line as well. And then obviously in the flanks, just the cheaper the flanking fangs. Usually you want cheaper flankers. You can put these 12 gold units here as well, but I always prefer having them in the middle just because they can cause more havoc. But usually just having these cheaper chargers in the flanking fang do well because they can threaten weak flanks. If your opponent doesn't have a very well protected flank, these can cause serious harm. They can easily take out like 2 or even 3 units if they have a very weak flank. And of course, they're not super easy to kill. No, they have 4 health, so they can usually take a hit. These 12 gold chargers can kill them, but it's very rare, in my opinion, unless they know what they're doing. But yeah, usually these super cheap flankers, well, not super cheap, but these like mid-range chargers can do really well on the flanks. And then lastly, just really beefy units. Elite Swordsman, Silverglade Ranger, Vesuvian Disruptor. All of them have just really good fighting stats. It's very hard to beat them in a one-on-one. They can usually beat these guys. So, like I said, these guys can also be anywhere in the Fangs. This goes for all of them, except for maybe these guys. But these can really just go anywhere in the Fangs because they have beefy and they can get around pretty easily, and they just do some pretty scary stuff if left alone. You know, the Ranger has backstab, 5 health, 3 damage, so can very easily duel any unit in the game. Vesuvian Disruptor has spell proof and backstab. Can walk up kind of safely and beat stuff. Does have mana burn too, but that's usually mainly for heroes as a tech card. And Elite Swordsman, one of my favorite cards, can heal himself kinda with giving himself shield 1 each turn. And with Counter Strike, he's not the easiest target to kill, and if you really want to, you can give him +1 power to really get that extra oomph in there. So yeah, usually the Fangs are usually beefy units that can cause serious damage to your opponent. These pockets here, this is what's called these 2 pockets inside. There's usually 2 units I want to go here. First is bodyguard units, I like to call them. Stuff like Pikeman, Grunt, and Sentinel. These units just are very cheap, and their job is usually to just help their team, either by taking hits like the Grunt or Pikeman, or in Sentinel's case, just helping things move around, and if need be, shove himself in front of another unit if it's in danger. So like this Heavy Knight's here and it's threatening something. The Sentinel can swap and then just sit here and just take the hit for the unit that was going to die. Because it's very cheap, you don't really mind too much if it dies. And you'd rather have, you'd probably would rather have this die than whatever it is that was here. Same for Pikeman. Pikeman can easily just move up here and block it. If he dies, I think that's kind of a win because it's very hard to die in the first place, but if need be, you'd rather have him die than something more expensive. And same goes for Grunt. He can easily move in front of stuff, take the hit instead of the unit that was going to die. So yeah, so bodyguard units is what I like to call very good here, just because they can easily protect these fangs if something goes wrong. And the other unit that's kind of good is what's called counter chargers. These are units that like to charge in after another unit moves forward. Like the crossbowman, it does extra damage if a unit is exhausted. So they move up, you can easily move in, do some damage, and then usually since they're kind of squishy, they really want to wait till most things are exhausted, and so they can easily move up and do damage safely. So Crossman's a good example. Northwing Hunter's another good example. Loves charging stuff that's already exhausted because of backstab. Can get free damage off and then just help other units set up damage next round. And then Dragon Hatchling, like I said, loves finding units that are already exhausted, running up, and then damaging them. And then they also usually like to just find a gap and threaten something in the back to where you have to kill them. So like Dragon Hatchling can move up, flame assault the knight and do some damage to it, and then he can threaten like coming here and then killing one of these back lines if this spot is open. Now, that's what these units kind of like to do. They like to go in, usually at the end of round 1, and then kill something at the start of round 2 and get a lot of value that way. Okay. And then lastly, these are, I like to call the archer spots. These two spots here. These are usually just where you want your more aggressive backline units to go, such as the archers, or like these kind of aggressive support units like Tempest Mage, because he can exhaust units or deal damage with Lightning Strike. And so these units here are very important. They do some good damage here. They can move up, just shoot for ping damage. Vesuvian Archer, just Gath doesn't really have an archer, so I kind of just have him here. But him being here is not too bad. And then like up Longbow Archer and Longbow Archer, they like to sit here and do some decent damage. And that brings me to these boys. These three I like to call the assassin units. The reason these guys are scary, and this is something you should be mindful of. So, for example, if you look and you see they even have a Skyrim Pegasus, you might not want to put an Elite Longbow here, because if they plop down a Skyrim Pegasus and the opponent is going first, they can very easily swoop in and take your Elite Longbow Archer, and there's not really God, I can't speak. There's nothing you can do because round 1 kills it, and it's an even trade. Their 6 gold unit takes out your 6 gold unit, but they also take out an action, so for them it's a net positive. Crag Wyvern's probably the scariest because he has 3 damage, which is the most. He also has 4 health, so he's not the easiest to kill. You can't really just challenge it with like a knight. You have to go something like a heavy knight to countercharge it or to threaten it. So Crag Wyvern's probably the scariest, because they even make something like a Vesuvian Archer not very good, because you can easily just swoop in, kill it, and that's usually an uptrade, because not only are you killing a unit that's -1 gold, you're also taking an action out. So yeah, archer spots are very nice, just because this is usually where they want to they usually just have the most targets here, I should say. And then here we just have like these aggressive support units, like the Northwing Sorcerer. He debuffs the enemy Has some kind of alright combat stats. The Warlock, roots enemies and burns them, silencing them. Again, very aggressive. And something like the Tempest Mage, like I said, likes to cause harm to the enemy rather than help your team. Well, they like to cause harm to the enemy through like debuffs or debuffers. I should just say that. Debuffers like to go here because they can easily move up here and then do something, or move here and do something. So usually debuffers like to go here. And these back 3 spots are very important. These back 3 spots are the support spots. These are very important because round 1, nothing's really going to take him out. There are some very niche situations where they can, but that's a very specific combo. You can usually see it coming, and it costs usually a lot of resources just to get back here round 1. So back here is usually where you want to keep your most important units that are very squishy. Spellcradle Seraph, Priest, Tactician. All these are really strong support units, but they all are very squishy. They die easily, so keeping them alive is pretty important. And since they don't have the health or stats to do it, just keeping them out of harm's way as best you can is pretty important. And of course, you can swap these around however you like. This is just a general term. Some other units here, like healers, of course, like to be back here. Buffers, like Troll Shaman. Another thing that likes to be back here are units that don't care about positioning. Sure, the Skulk Sorcerer has 1 health, but he doesn't really care about positioning because Brutality is global, so he can be back here and easily buff whatever it is you want to buff. So him being back here isn't really a downside. And if he wants to use Enrage, he can very easily run up and Enrage something. Him being back here is hardly a hindrance for him. Just because he's super mobile, he can easily just get into range if he wants to. And then units kind of like Grovekeeper Druid, of course, doesn't really care about positioning because he usually summons his Treant. And then the other 2 abilities are global, so him being back here is just alright. He's gonna have his Druid do stuff, and then he's gonna be safe back here with his global range. Again, healer, and again, just very important buffing units, such as Arbor Mage. And last but not least are these 3 hexes on the side. And usually one wants to go here are just cheap units that are mobile. Squire can be here because he is kind of a really cheap bodyguard. So he can move in front of stuff and just take a hit. Apprentice Wizard, because he's 2 gold, he can come up here and just diminish something and then die. So usually what wants to be in these 3 hexes in the very corners are just your very cheap units, your blah units that that aren't really going to win you the game. They're kind of just there to do stuff early on. Or because I have 2 gold, I'm just gonna put a Squire here, or these flankers here because all these other spots are more important for other units. So just plop them in the corner here and just have them do something useful round 2. So yeah, these corner spots are usually just for your blah units. Yeah, these middle spots are infinitely more important. And then as for heroes, you just put them wherever you think you want them to be. Heroes are super flexible. They can fit any role usually. So you can really put them anywhere you want and then they'll be good. So anyway, I hope I got my point across. I know this is a bit longer of a video, but I hope that when you next play, your positioning will be a bit easier, and I hope that your game will go a lot smoother just because of your positioning. I know I said the same thing twice, but I'm not good at this. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.